Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Combeluzier, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar focuses on Libero Copper and Gold, which is a mineral exploration company that holds a collection of porphyry copper deposits throughout the Americas in prolific but stable jurisdictions. The portfolio includes Big Bulk, Big Red, Esperanza, and Makoa. Today I have on the webinar with me Ian Harris, President and CEO, and Thomas Mumford, who's the exploration expert for Canada at Libero Copper and Gold. The format of today's webinar will be comprised of two parts. In the first part, Ian and Thomas will provide an introduction to Libero Copper, including an overview of the company's projects and what investors have to look forward to in the near term. In the second part, we'll take your questions live. So please submit your questions using the chat and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar. To start, we'll handle the disclosures and then get into it. So for Libero Copper, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Libero Copper corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Libero Copper specific disclosure. So now I'll turn it over to Ian and Thomas to introduce you to Libero Copper and what you have to look forward to with the company.
Thanks, Taylor. Great introduction and saves a lot of time going over the second slide. But yeah, I am Ian Harris. I'm the president and CEO. And joining me today is Thomas Mumford, who's our geological guru and in charge of the Canadian exploration programs. Again, there are forward-looking statements within this presentation. Taylor gave a very good overview, and this part might be getting a little boring, but I think it's important to point out not just what's happening on a macro level within the copper industry and a predicted large difference between supply and demand coming up, but that we also recognize that to take advantage of that situation requires having a focus that you want the most advanced projects as possible when that bifurcation starts happening. And so we have a ton of exploration expertise within the company, but we also have a lot of experience in advancing very large scale projects and seeing them all the way through and knowing what owners of companies that want to construct projects are looking for and always focused on de-risking them in all those different areas as if we have that same optics. And we really bring that to the table. We're already, even after a post-discovery, we're already thinking about that. And I think that's even demonstratable in the exploration programs that we have at Big Red this year. So again, we're always looking at, immediately post-discovery, we're looking at always defining the size and scale and defining an exploration target for the projects to advance them towards mineral resource. And that's important because 90% of the world's copper production comes from open pit porphyry copper mines. So that requires very large scale mines, near surface mineralization, nicely disseminated, and then again, big, right? To have a 30,000 ton per day mine, that's at least a 200 million ton reserve at the end of the day to be able to get that into production. So we're making sure that our projects are checking those boxes and we're having that focus early on in our projects. And again, a lot of this is repeat, but we obviously really like the jurisdictions we're working. Obviously, nobody will discuss or I think argue over British Columbia, but also Colombia has made massive changes. I was actually in a meeting with the National Chamber of Mines and the Vice Minister recently. And all I could think about during the meeting was, the tone and the attitude of the Vice Minister, and thinking how lucky we are to be in Colombia. Very proactive, always looking on how do we make improvements. And it's really a breath of fresh air after 15 years working in South America. And the last is Argentina in San Juan. which is the most prolific mining jurisdiction within Argentina. So these are all great jurisdictions to be able to move forward very large scale mining projects. And I won't hit on this in the interest of time, since we've already gone over this several times in the last few updates. But again, we are very proud of the team that has been put around our projects. The most recent addition, Lisa Peterson, is ex-Barrick Gold Chief of Staff of Capital Projects, including the area between Chile and Argentina. She brings a lot to the table with her background in ESG and also her work in Argentina. So again, the team just continues to get better and better, and we're very excited about the quality and the level of the people that are currently involved. So the next is an opportunity, and I think this really is probably we have an incredible team, we have wonderful projects, we've put together a very solid strategy. We're now finally executing on that strategy and starting to see the initial results from that. So it's very exciting times within the company, but still, in terms of share structure, we're very tight with 47 million shares out. We continue, even though it's been very quiet in the mining space. Just checked today, we still are trading on an average of 150,000 shares per day, and our market cap is still, although it has had a slight improvement recently, it's still sitting around $52 million. So I think we're right at that crux now that we're getting into actually the execution of our strategies on the ground, that this will probably be changing in the very near future. Management is committed to the company and has participated in every single one of the private placements. B2 Gold continues to have 5%. That was from the initial acquisition of Makoa in Colombia. And US Global, that helped really structure the company in the early days, continues to hold 5%. And an investor today that bought a share would be participating basically at the same levels that everybody else has. Since August of 2019, every single one of the private placements is been at 50 cents. So everybody knows that the interests are all aligned, and we're all going to be the ability to grow together. So getting down into the interesting part and really about this update, this is I remember the first webinar we had, it was really talking about the assets, what we were going to do, and the strategies we were developing. The next one was then on, boots were about to hit the ground at Big Red. Drilling was starting, but today, it's even more exciting because the first drill results are coming in. We've drilled 10 holes. One hole has come in and we have the results. Activities have also started at Makoa. So we're right on that edge where really that strategy is starting to all come together. And really Big Red, where the majority of the activity has happened, really is the project that had really transformed the company with a porphyry copper discovery at the end of 2002. So at the beginning of the season, we had a discovery. It was with an RC rig, so limited to the depth potential. But we really liked what we were seeing, and we were chomping at the bit to get back into this with proper sized rigs. But we started off with 120 meters at 0.41 equivalent copper directly from surface, and on the Terry target. And now I will turn it over to Thomas to say, where did we go from there?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, this was the first season that we've ever had a diamond drill testing this Terry target. So we drilled the last holes of last year were with an RC rig, which was limited at depth, primarily due to the water table. So we got down to about 120 meters depth, 0.41 copper equivalent, and the hole just had to stop at that point. We knew the mineralization kept on going. We were mineralized from top to bottom of those holes. So we were pretty excited this year to come back and really extend that at depth. The first thing we did this season, we got going in June. We started off with a soil program covering the area around that original drilling. The drilling last season was right around here. And that drilling, went south, east, and west from there, and just really stepped out from that. Once we came in, we realized the mineralization was much more extensive than that. We had geological mapping and sampling to the south of the drilling, and we knew that the mineralization continued over there. So we did this large soil grid over the top of the area. And one thing with the soiling that we did was we were able to use a portable XRF on site. So we were able to get real-time analysis on the copper in the soil. So we had a really good vector while we were progressing. After the soiling was underway, we had an IP grid come up and be placed over the area, and did a 3D IP grid over top of basically all the areas of drilling up in this northern section of the map here. And so that IP grid really tested the disseminated mineralization extent that we saw there, and give us a lot more vectors to target the drilling. And after that, we followed up with the diamond drilling. The first holes of the year, we stepped back from that original pad from 2020. We went 50 meters north of there, and we drilled, parallel to some of the nicer holes that we had drilled in 2020. And those are the first results that are going to come out this year. So we have one drill hole that's already been released, and I'll talk about that shortly. But we've drilled another 3 holes off of that pad, and then we stepped out from that to vector towards other targets in the area. And so we're waiting drill results on those targets as well. The whole summer was pretty interesting in how it developed, in that, we were getting a lot of positive vectors from the exploration that we did this year. So the soils came back phenomenal. We had excellent soil grades and distribution of them, and consistent with the geology that we had observed. The IP was very interesting, gave us a lot of new vectors to target off of that. But we had a regional mapping program going during the soil sampling and the IP and the drilling. And one thing that came away from that is we found new copper mineralization 2 kilometers to the east and to the southeast, and identified 4 new showings that hadn't been discovered before. And some of those look pretty promising to us from the get-go. And now we've got a glimpse at some of the results that are coming out there, and they're both copper and gold rich. So it's quite a nice sign for us. And with that new information, we were able to, adapt to that. We put another soil grid over on the other side there near the scorcher target. We ended up drilling that target as well after we got the soil results, and the mapping results came in. And then we did a large mag survey over the entire area. So our Big Red project had a large mag survey done on before with a widely spaced line. So it had a little bit coarser resolution, but it was still working for us to vector towards different items and different features in the geology. But once we kind of pinned down this area and knew that the mineralization was occurring in this area, we did another mag survey with a much tighter line spacing to really provide much more resolution on what we were drilling from it. And so that just completed in September, in late September. So we were pretty fortunate to be able to get that out. And from that, we've generated all these targets. We've drilled 9 holes and tested a lot of these new targets, and the mineralization that we're seeing in the holes is very promising to us. Mineralization style is a bit unique. There's not a lot of quartz in the system, which is something that you expect in a lot of the calc-alkaline porphyries in BC. What we see is an absence of quartz. We see a lot of disseminated chalcopyrite. We see chrysocolla and malachite near surface on many of the holes. The main intrusive rocks in the area are these very nice porphyritic cyanites. And as well, we also get breccia phases that are rich in carbonate. They have biotite and chloride alteration after biotite. And really, this looks more like a silica critical situation. So we're looking more like an alkalic system than a alkaline system. And so the nearest proxy for us would be a Galore Creek, which would be a silica undersaturated deposit, but we're more of a silica critical. But and nevertheless, we are looking at something that looks much more alkalic than we thought originally. And so vectoring towards some of these smaller, higher grade porphyry centers is definitely going to be the name of the game as we progress on this target. The drill holes that we've been drilling have been quite extensive in length. We drilled, I think, 4 or 5 that are over 500 meters in length. And we have mineralization down very deep, if not to the bottom, in most of those holes. Looking at our first drill hole from this season, you can see it here. This is a 510 meter long hole, colored into mineralization right from the get-go after just a short amount of 8 meters of overburden. We hit the same zone, that highly mineralized zone near the top of the hole, just like we did in the original RC holes discovered in 2020 last year. And so that first bit of this hole ran quite high, 118 meters of 0.33 copper equivalent. And largely the mineralization here is associated with a dike swarm that trends east-west through the area, and it's hosted in an andesitic unit. And so the volume and the density of these dikes really affects the amount of mineralization that we see. And so we hit kind of 3 big zones in this hole, and those are largely consistent with the parallel holes that we've drilled throughout the season. So we see that same mineralization style in the other holes adjacent to this. We just don't have the assays yet to show what that mineralization looks like. But we're very impressed with the continuity and the consistency of the geology of the area. But at this point, we haven't hit any pure porphyry phase. It's mostly been a dike swarm off it. So it seems like we could be vectoring towards something quite large and substantial. The big takeaways from this hole was just that it was mineralized from top to bottom. I mean, there was low zones of copper, but entirely mineralized from top to bottom. And we've drilled a number of holes in and around this that also support that thesis. Oh, Ian, you're on mute, I think.
Thanks, Thomas. And, in many ways, I really think that you and your team undersell yourselves. I remember telling in previous webinars how the Canadian team really works on almost on autopilot. And really, the group there is incredibly experienced and incredibly empowered. And that shows, I think, through the amount of work that was done in one season, right? That was the very first diamond drill hole that was ever put into this target, and it was over 500 meters. And so much was learned, and the way that the program adapted so quickly from just understanding the mineralization style, or getting theses on, or on that same the trend directions, the type of really getting that first solid core. And the way that the team immediately identified new targets, immediately moved soil sampling, and within one season also even got a drill hole into a brand new target, all within just a couple of months, I think really talks about the quality. And then as the mining engineer side of me gets really excited, I mean, as a first hole, I could not imagine something better. And I really think, this slide helps put that into perspective, right? I use this slide because, based on similar grades, similar areas, and similar size potential, or a target that a size that we should be looking for, that helps direct us on how we can create value for our shareholders. But it also helps understand that how these stories start, right? GT Gold back in 2017 had their discovery hole on Saddle North. And their discovery hole was 211 meters at a 0.27 copper equivalent, right? That was their first hole. That went on to be a 841 million ton resource between indicated and inferred, and I think in the end was over 0.5% copper equivalent and after 30,000 meters, and ended up selling for $450 million to Newmont. Right. So it gives us a lot of things. It tells us, we're not starting off too bad. I mean, we had, a higher grade discovery hole. And then at the very next first diamond hole ever into the deposit is over 500 meters and completely mineralized from top to bottom. And that's exciting for many reasons. First of all, we talked, it's mineralization from surface. It's completely disseminated throughout the hole. So when you think in terms of strip ratios and every bucket that goes into a shovel, you want it to be going to your plant, but also the size and the scale. 800 million tons is basically a big cube of 700 by 700 by 700 meters of pure mineralization. So that's another reason why you see these larger step-offs on our own program. We're really trying to hunt and get an idea of size and scale, and also creating those vectors on how to find what is driving all this mineralization into these swarms. Because we know that if we can come up with a resource and a size project that's checking all those boxes, that we can create significant value for our shareholders. And that GT Gold, I love the comparison, even though Thomas mentioned that Galore is probably the most comparable in terms of geological potential. But it's a very clear path of how GT Gold created significant value for our shareholders. So this is obviously a project that's continuing to check boxes, and continuing to say that this is a project that can create significant value for our shareholders, and we look forward to advancing it. So, although we still have another 9 holes that are coming in, including one on a new potential target. Looking into next year, we're definitely going to be looking forward to increasing the scope and scale. continuing to define the extents of the deposit to make sure that it has the size and scale necessary to become a significant deposit, but also what Thomas alluded to. All this drilling this year is really going to create some significant vectors. Looking back, there's some sections that are over 1% copper in certain units, and we still haven't found a true porphyry center to this thing, but we're off to a wonderful start. So we're really excited about a Big Red. The other project that we have in BC, and I won't go over it because it's very much a binary test, is Big Bulk. We did put 2,000 meters into Big Bulk. We still have 5 holes that have been got to lab, and we're waiting for results on this project too. And it really is based on a new interpretation of some old drilling and old mapping, and it's been kind of reinterpreted in thinking that perhaps some of these good hits that were historic skipped through because they thought it was vertical and it's been tilted on its side. So based on that thesis, we put some holes based on the new interpretation to the center of it, and we will be knowing probably by the end of the year if we have something that can enter to our project pipeline or not. Moving on to the additional projects in South America, the first is Esperanza. Esperanza is, back in 2018, probably had one of the top 10 drill holes of any project in the world put into it. With over 1% copper on the first 200 meters. And it's the last hole that was put into the project. Unfortunately, it was 2018. It was copper. It was Argentina, prospect generator model. And it's the last hole. So, that's an incredible hole to start off with. So that you're especially from surface, very economic grades. And then, so the next question mark, as alluded to in previous comments, is that size and scale. And just looking at the mineralization or the alteration on the surface, you can see that this, even from Google Maps, it's about 2 kilometers by 1 kilometer wide. This footprint of alteration, so it's a big size system. And so we're really excited of being able to get back into restarting Esperanza. It's right now working on reactivating the exploration permit. I've been alluding to this and saying this in all previous conversations. It's an election year. I think there was just an article came out actually yesterday where the ministry officially said that everything is pushed out until after elections on all significant decisions and also meetings or planning sessions on projects. So it's now at least official, and it's not just me saying it, but we have informal indications that after elections are over, then there'll be a massive push to get everything moving forward in a timely manner. But right now, everything's just focused on politics. And in the meantime, we've been really looking at, we've gone back, we've relogged the core, we've added another 3,000 hectares to the west, and really spent our time trying to getting up on the learning curve. We already have lined out drillers, camp, everything, that we can pull the trigger on it fairly fast. And unfortunately, Thomas did an excellent job describing the geology of Big Red, but from a high level, we were very excited about the things that we're seeing at Esperanza. That the very high grade seems to be that it's the result of multiple pulses. That's evident through the multiple styles of alteration, the multiple styles of veins that we have within the core. That says that this has been, multiple pulses, and then has that potential of that telescoping effect, and also that there's some sort of feeder zone feeding this geologically. So when we look around and we look for comparables, obviously Argentina is a land of some very big elephants. We really said, geologically, this looks like very comparable to Filo de Sol in terms of the age of the rocks, the types of the alteration, the types of veins, same site of overprint. For multiple reasons, it seems the most comparable. If you look at the core of the 2 projects, they look like they almost came from the same place. You look at the cross sections. The only significant difference is they're drilling through their lithocap, where part of ours has been washed away in the valley. But basically, what they were doing back in 2019 is our plan when we start drilling. We have a 5,000 meter drill program planned out, and we're hope to execute that in the first quarter of next year. And we'll be really following in the same footsteps as them. And, back in 2019, they were testing the top of the system and developing the vectors to hunt for their feeder zone. Obviously, we were probably the second most excited group when they hit their feeder zone in May of 2021, because it confirmed a lot of things that we were thinking about our own project. And only increased our excitement that Esperanza could have something very, very similar to it. And so, basically Filo del Sol has checked all the, geologically, they're very similar projects. The difference is theirs has been drilled and we need to drill ours. Obviously Filo del Sol is worth over $1 billion today. So again, I really like this is the type of project we want to be investing our money into, because it can create significant value for shareholders. And our last project is Makoa. I'm actually currently in Colombia. I've been here permanently since June, except for a few times that they let me escape and get out and talk to potential shareholders, because it's a project that's actually very close to my heart, not just because I'm a mining engineer that already has an existing resource, but for other reasons. It already has a very significant resource, 636 million tons. If that was mined over 20 years, that's 90,000 tons per day. It's one of the largest mines, be a top 20 size mine within the world in terms of copper. It already contains over 4 billion pounds of pure copper, over 6 billion pounds on an equivalent basis, and also is one of the largest untapped moly resources. It's over 500 million pounds of moly. The world production is about 600 million. So, again, same math, over 20 years, that's 5% of the world moly production from a single undeveloped resource. And we obviously like that, moly is now hovering around $20 per pound and continues to have strength. And it already has very significant drill holes into it. I just recalculated based on our metals prices. We have holes with 0.75 of copper equivalent over 634 meters, 779 at 0.65. And keep in mind that this is a project that was drilled systematically. It wasn't really, meant to be targeting. It was just vertical holes and two step outs. And we look at the general area. It's in the Jurassic Porphyry belt that runs all the way through Chile up through Peru, Ecuador, and now into Colombia. The closest project that's the closest operated mine is called Mirador, where I personally spent 6 years, took that project through sale and then into the start of construction, and 6 years of my life, where I tell a lot of people, I went down as a mining engineer, I left as a socio-politician, because really learned through some very dramatic moments, a new constitution, new mining law, national protests, but it went on to become the first large-scale mining operation in the history of that country. And really, in Makoa, it feels very similar, same style, personalities, in kind of the folds of the Andes, tropical type rainforest, lots of rain, but biggest is the personality of the people. And another person that's with us is Ernie Mast, who's a director who was CEO of Inmetz Cobre Panama, that went on to build de-risk that project completely until First Quantum picked it up, constructed it to become the first large-scale mining operation in the history of Panama. So a lot of the work that we've been doing this year behind the scenes is, what are all the things that went right for us at those two projects? What were the key linchpins to getting them working and starting them from the very beginning of the project? Make sure we get our ducks in a row, and we're moving forward on a project that is extremely sustainable and move forward. Because it's a project that has significant opportunities. Again, that 638 million tons inferred resource is a pit constrained resource. You can see the pit outline. And again, it was drilled very systematically, right? It's still where the last hole is where mineralization stops, right? So it's open in all directions. And really, it's just one small part of this deposit has even been investigated. So it's got lots of room to grow. And you can see in terms of scale that, if you go through kind of the center of the significant mineralization of the project, that's over 1,000 meters of continuous mineralization through the center of this thing. So we're obviously very excited to be able to get back into it. Because it can create significant value for our shareholders and become one of the most significant projects on the planet, I believe, right? And, you know, you look in terms of the most comparable project, Warintza, which is only 50 kilometers north of Mirador, right? There's such a similar story. Both were historically drilled back in 2001. David Lowell, did the last drill holes into the project, and since then was kind of sitting on the shelf. The same for Libero. Makoa was last drilled in 2012 by B2 Gold. Both had very systematic approaches to how they drilled it. The first thing both companies did is when we acquired the projects was do a resource estimate. Solaris came up with 124 million tons at a 0.77 copper equivalent. We did the same thing, but ours was much bigger, the 636 million tons of inferred also, but at 0.48 equivalent copper. So a little lower grade, but much more disseminated. But if you take a closer look at it, if we go back and we use a different cutoff, we actually come up with 148 million tons at 0.75% equivalent copper. So our core looks very similar to the deposit at Warintza. They all previously had very similar previous holes into them. So back in 2020, Solaris came back and they got their agreements with the community. They started with geophysics, they started with soil sampling, started getting ready for drilling, and then started drilling in 2020. And put out some spectacular drill holes, retesting the old deposit. To be frank, right? Over 500 meters at 1% equivalent copper, and then have gone out and continued to test the additional clusters, additional step outs, and really getting into looking further and bigger and continue to put out fantastic holes. 1,000 meters at 0.81% equivalent copper, and today they're worth $1.4 billion. And so we look at where we are at today, right? We have been spending our time this year making sure that we have a very solid base and a very solid relationship with local communities, that we're going to be starting our work off of a solid license to operate. And, recently we said, you know what? It's time to start moving, right? There's the expectation, there's the desire, there's the collaboration. So we pulled the trigger and we said, let's start moving. In October, we started with geophysics, very similar with magnetics. We're now moving towards starting our soil sampling in anticipation of being able to start our drilling programs in the very beginning of next year. So obviously we're very excited about Makoa because it has a very similar potential and creates significant value for our shareholders, following in the footsteps of somebody else. I really I'm not afraid to blaze new trails, right? But it's always nice when you know that you're stepping on some these are easy decisions. All these projects deserve to have investment put into them because they can all create significant value for our shareholders. So getting back to where I was previously, so how do we do that, right? And a lot of it is those lessons learned, building a very solid house, making sure you get your house into order, making sure you have a solid value system. There's this commitment to that value system, and you have a very simple to understand operating system that connects with the personalities and the desires of the local community. Because it always starts with creating significant strength locally, finding those national alliances to continue to drive political will. Where Ecuador and Panama, that really needed to be created. In Colombia, it already exists. You have a president that's saying, I want to be the third largest producer of copper in Latin America. We have the largest resource of copper in the entire country. So obviously that was music to our ears, but it doesn't mean we're going to change our game plan. We're going to continue to be building strength on this triangle every single day to ensure that we can continuously work, because these are big scale projects that require a significant amount of investment to continue to move them forward, but at the same time can create significant value. And so that's what we did. I went through this last time and we really put together a strategy, got our house in order, and executed locally, nationally, politically. Most recently, we just signed an agreement with the National University of Colombia And I really like the spirit because they see the importance of the project. They know it's going to be a significant project for the country and they want to be a part of it. And of course, we want them to be a part of it, right? Because we do truly believe that that's the way you really create the most value, that truly create technology transfer, truly create opportunities. And that means, bringing all of Colombia and the local community as a part of it. And so the next steps that we have moving forward, again, we have the geophysics that's coming in. We're finalizing some right-of-way negotiations, starting soil sampling, putting our camp in, and in anticipation, getting the support ready to support a significant size drilling program. So why magnetics? It's simple. There's alterations that have significant magnetite concentrations, and there's alterations that wipe out that magnetite that creates that magnetic bipole. And because we already have an existing deposit, we already have a fingerprint. So we did a significant geomagnetics over the existing concessions that we already have. And then the next step is, as you can see, right, there's been very limited soil sampling done. It was basically some soil sampling, drilled, hit a target, started some new soil sampling, and it's still untested. But most of these Jurassic systems, you had Mirador, Mirador Norte, Bonanza, San Carlos, they're very cluster style. And so the best way to find those clusters is through geochemistry and then identifying the anomalies of copper and moly. So we are going to also be starting that program. So we have a lot of work to do on the existing deposit, right? Again, it's already massive at 90,000 tons per day if it was a mine today. But also it has plenty of legs to continue to grow. So we need to do that basic homework and get a large scale systematic soils program put into place in the near future. And then the last thing that we just announced is also significant. You can see this darker brown. That's the existing concessions around the Makoa project. And what we've done is we really wanted to increase a significant amount of the land holdings. Obviously, because we know the potential, we know that as soon as the noise and Makoa news starts getting out, that there'll be new players wanting to come in. So now was the time to do it. But also because we've worked so hard creating a really strong relationship with our local communities, we really wanted to avoid having too many new players in the area. So this is an additional over 100,000 hectares. So very, we've done the submission and we're working through the process to be getting these additional titles on the existing Jurassic intrusives. So in summary, today we're trading for our market cap is $25 million, and we have 3 significant pipelines of clear paths on how to create value. Big Red, continuing drill results should be coming out. Makoa, obviously getting restarted, moving towards exploration. Esperanza, kind of hopefully in the final steps to reactivating its exploration permits. So we look forward to every quarter to have more and more news coming out of us. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ian and Thomas. So now we'll turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar. And just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type in your questions to the chat box at any time now. So we've had a couple questions come in. First up, I'm not sure which project the question's referring to, but I assume Makoa. What are the plans for a metallurgical test program and preliminary flow sheet development?
Yeah, I'm glad it was an engineering question, right? So the previous metallurgical work was done in the 1980s. So I've already mentioned it a few times, the very first drill holes that we do, we'll be focusing them on to make sure that we have a good sample to redo metallurgy, right? It's already an inferred resource. So I talk a lot about, we're probably about a 50-50 blend between infilling on the existing resource, confirm the old drilling, although we have all the core and we've been relogging, and the other 50% in expansion, but making sure that infill drilling is getting the engineering information. So even the first holes will be making sure we're getting the geotechnical information and the metallurgical information to push us towards a PEA, right? We do think that's an important step to continue to de-risk the project, not just in terms of exploration, but also in terms of engineering, environmental, and social.
Great. Okay. And then just sticking with Makoa, could you just kind of paint a picture for what kind of infrastructure there is at the project in the area there?
The project, I wish I could go back to the last slide because you actually see the main road system. We're only 10 kilometers from the town of Makoa, right? With significant infrastructure very near to us. The other thing I was surprised about, it's even higher than I thought, but about 3 meters of rain a year too. So in terms of water, infrastructure, power, roads, etc., it's very strategically located. In terms of safety too, it's nice to be fairly close to a decent sized population, but far enough away where we don't have a single house. We do have houses within our area of influence, but not under the existing deposit of where potential infrastructure would probably go. So it's kind of like a little bit of a blessing in many ways, right?
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. And then just with the most recent news about picking up more ground there, do you have plans to acquire more, or do you have kind of what's of interest, or is there even the opportunity to potentially pick up more, I guess, if need be?
We started off with a very simple criteria. We had some historical soils and sediment sampling that was used. We also have the mapping of the Jurassic intrusive, and we started basically working our way away from our project. We said we don't want to be in any forestry reserve or any indigenous areas, not because we're not, that we're afraid to pick up ground there, but it's kind of, we want the low-lying fruit, right? I mean, I should step back. We're already working on, reaching out our areas as our conversations. We're already taking a lot of the material that we're doing and translating into native languages to make sure those relationships. And it's actually been pretty surprising that people are like, you are actually spending the time to do this for us. Like, nobody's ever done this for us. It's amazing how these little things go a really long way in developing a collaborative relationship from the very beginning. So in the future, I think there's some strategic things that we'll be able to be built off of that relationship. But it was basically picking up additional ground that looked good, that had some potential, some exclusion areas. But we will be continuing to process that, right? Because I mean, I'll be frank. I think that when the world really understands what's going on at Makoa, when drills are starting to turn and some of the results will be coming out, there won't be a patch of land left. And so that was really a big part of our decision making. This is say, do we really want a bunch of strangers, coming out here and really kind of potentially ruining some of the strong work that we're already doing? So we could potentially add up some additional land, right? I think that we've obviously developed an expertise in working in Colombia and then South America in general, and we will continue to leverage that when it can create value for our shareholders.
Great. Okay. Okay. Another question. Kind of switching to the corporate side. Just wondering what your cash requirements are. Kind of looking forward for the next year.
Yeah, if we had all projects moving forward on full till, right? I mean, we have some luxuries. We have a little bit of ability to put a slider on how fast we move. My desire would be to make sure that every single one of the projects advances in 2022. And so that's more or less a minimum spend of about $10 million between all projects, a little bit of corporate overhead, but let's call it the $10 to $12 million range. And then obviously we will take advantage. We are watching market every day. We'll be continuing to watch for opportunities. We obviously want to make sure that any financing we do doesn't have significant dilution to our existing shareholders. But there's obviously a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. And then turning to Big Red, you talked a little bit about the vectors that can point you towards potential targets there. Obviously you're having success now with the second porphyry discovery Scorcher. What I guess is the most important thing at Big Red to point you in the right direction? Like, what's the big most important aspect of that?
You're on mute, Thomas.
Yeah, so I think just the integration of all the data sets that we have is the next big push that we're going to make. I mean, we've got this brand new IP survey, we've got all this soil data. The last piece that I'm really waiting for right now is the mag data set to come in, that new mag survey, but also the drilling results. So once we have all those that we can put together, we can kind of say, okay, this is, this geophysical signature is working with the drill set that we have, and this is what we'll be using to vector off of that. And then we'll also be doing like detailed petrography on the holes that we have, given that we have a unique mineralogy and alteration style in it, just to see what that kind of points us towards. But it's really the drill results that are outstanding right now that'll be the biggest vector, saying this is what runs, this is what doesn't run. And then we've got a lot of geophysics and geochemistry that we can use to, add additional targets to our program next year, as well as step outs.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I think I would add too that we're actually in a very, it's a luxury to be in the position we're in with the first hole already coming out, confirming so many things that allows us to be a little bit more aggressive and make sure we're putting a little additional holes into new targets and testing new theories and testing new ideas while we continue to execute on our overall strategy to move the project towards exploration target and then moving towards resource development. Allows us, we're not sweating bullets, right? We can, go forward with just basic boots on the ground, proven geological tech and exploration techniques, and still have that little bit of where we're have the ability to test new theories and concepts to really, that could make a more significant impact to the project.
Mm-hmm. And when you put out that drill hole, you mentioned that the logging and adjacent holes, it's pointing to lateral continuity of that copper mineralization. Is that primarily based on the alteration style, or is it also the lithology?
That's lithology, and then we do in-stream XRF analysis of the core just to get a proxy for what the mineralization is, just as a very rudimentary test. So, it's a combination of lithology of what we're seeing in the holes, hole to hole along that lateral extent. It's what we see at surface, and we know that the dike swarms are trending largely east-west. And then we have a little bit of quantitative evidence from the XRF about what the mineralization is doing further along to the east and the west.
Okay, great. Okay. Turning a little bit now to the, valuation, looking at Libero compared to peers, on a EV per pound basis, you're extremely undervalued. What do you think, or why do you think that is, I guess?
So this really great analyst put out a calculation that showed us that we're just on Makoa, where, our EV value per pound is $0.002 per pound, or 0.2 cents per pound.
Mm-hmm.
We're the lowest on the bottom of that totem pole. And really, I think it's because of multiple reasons, right? The discovery of Big Red happened at December of last year. Within that time, we've acquired 2 additional projects. Every single one of those names you saw on the management and officers that were orange has come in from the beginning of the year. We spent most of our time putting together a solid strategy. We know that if we do our work solidly, then we will create value, right? There's no quick to it. No quick way to get to the finish line, right? Over a sustainable long period of time. So that was the most critical component for us, is making sure we have a solid execution strategy on every single one of the projects, and to make sure that we have the ability to advance them, right? That we have the teams in place and we have the people in place and the ability to advance every single one of them, right? Now that we're executing on those strategies, right, we're, with Big Red and now Makoa, et cetera, it's now time to get the story out. We do know that it's important to make sure that everybody's hearing that story. And one of the reasons why we're working with Red Cloud to assist with us and make sure that people are hearing the story. And I think the other key component, right, is that people need to see Makoa moving forward. And that's why we spent so much time making sure that it moves forward on a solid base. A lot of our valuation in the near term will be based on Makoa. And if we just get it, like one little drill hole into it, it's just kind of like a flash in the pan. That's not what we're looking for. We know it's a large scale project that needs to have a sustainable base that it can create significant value for our shareholders over an extended period of time. So I think that all those components will be coming together, and it's obviously why we're so excited, because we know that we're we're going to start getting into that slog here where the story gets out and we start building more and more and more intention on the company.
Fantastic. Okay. And, before we wrap up here, maybe if you have any kind of final words for investors or final pitch, that'd probably be a good way to wrap things up this afternoon.
I think we've summarized so many things in terms of the quality of the assets, the strategy that we're applying, the team that we have all together. I think everything is really coming together. We obviously have multiple company building style projects. All of them deserve a kick at the can. We obviously know we'll be paying attention to what market is telling us in terms of level of interest and strategies that we can apply. But for now, we know that we need to make sure that every single one of them moves forward. And there's obviously lots of strategies that we can apply into the future. And something that when I get a chance, and again, ask that type of question is I really do believe something that really happens that's behind the scenes that most people really don't see is that we've really created a solid value system, and we're really driven and have high level of commitment from every single one of the employees that those values and that operating philosophy creates significant value for our shareholders, right? And it's something that I like pitching, that it's very important. It's not just ESG numbers and statistics. It's actually what's actually happening on the ground, and the way that every single one of your employees acts is such a critical component. And it's probably one of the areas that I'm most proud of.
Perfect. So with that, we'll wrap things up. So thank you very much, Ian and Thomas from Libero Copper, for taking the time to host this webinar today with Red Cloud Securities. And thank you to everybody on the line for tuning in with us.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you.